Hello and welcome to this tutorial about Microsoft Hyper-V. In this tutorial, you will learn about the virtualization basics. Today, we are diving into the world of virtualization. Whether you are a student, IT enthusiast, or just curious about the technology, this video will give you a solid foundation in understanding what virtualization is and how to get started with Microsoft Hyper-V. My name is Navneet Kumar. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and the founder of TrainCrest Technologies. Imagine having multiple computers running on a single machine. That's essentially what virtualization is. It's a process of creating virtual versions of compute like servers or the storage and the network. This allows you to run multiple operating systems and the applications simultaneously on a single physical machine. And these applications or the virtual machines are abstracted from each other. That means that they do not compete for the resources from the underlying hardware. That is what virtualization makes it different from running the applications on a physical server. If you run multiple applications simultaneously on one physical machine, then they will start competing for the resources like compute or storage resources, and that can degrade the performance of your server, or one application can degrade the performance of another application. So without compromising with the performance and for utilizing the underlying hardware in a better way, we can think of using the virtualization. We can install a virtualization stack on top of the hardware and then deploy the virtual machines. In fact, this transfers the intelligence from the hardware to the software, which we can use efficiently to run the servers. We can improve the high availability of these servers. That improved high availability of the servers can result into the more business because your servers or services will have less downtime. I have seen over the last 20 years the virtualization taking place over the data centers, and today almost all data centers use virtualization in some form, shape or capacity. If I talk about the key benefits of virtualization, number one is cost effective. So this reduces the hardware cost by consolidating the multiple servers onto a single machine. This lets you leverage the benefit of resource pooling and utilizing the underlying infrastructure in a better way. I have seen many of the organizations struggling with their data centers which are underutilized. The capacity planning was not done properly and the data center resources are idle, they are not utilized. That results into the huge cost or the capital of your business, and also not good for the environment. Number two is improved resource utilization and reduced carbon footprints. So it maximizes the use of your hardware with less energy consumption. That means that you need not to run multiple physical servers or more number of physical servers. With less physical servers, you can run more number of virtual machines and better utilize your physical servers. That reduces the utilization of the energy, the power supply, that reduces low heat, and for that the cooling infrastructure is also capable of reducing the carbon footprints, and that helps into the offering the good environment. So this is environment friendly as well, not only saving your pockets but saving the environment. Number three is increased flexibility. So we can easily create, modify or move the resources like virtual machines across the hosts in the cluster. So it offers the flexibility of moving the resources and servicing the underlying physical hardware. Number four is disaster recovery. We can use it as a DR solution as well. We can replicate our servers from one geolocation to other geolocation to mitigate the risk of the disaster by setting up the business continuity and disaster recovery. Number five is testing and development. For testing and development environments, this virtualization provides the benefit by isolating the applications and environments for testing purpose. So your applications are completely isolated from your production environments. You can test whatever you want to test on them without affecting your production environments. Microsoft Hyper-V is a powerful virtualization platform that you can use. It's built into the Windows Server or the Windows client operating systems, where you can create and run the virtual machines. It allows you to create and manage not only the virtual machines on the physical machines, but also the storage virtualization you can do. You also can do the network virtualization. So today in the data centers, I have seen the companies not only depending on the hardware virtualization or compute virtualization, but they go way beyond that. So the organizations use storage virtualization, be it storage space direct, S2D feature of Microsoft that leverages the storage stack virtualization and lets you develop or lets you deploy the virtual SAN kind of solution. The network virtualization to run multiple virtual networks or overlay networks on top of one physical network. The user state virtualization is there in the data centers these days. We have the application virtualization, applications running in the abstracted containers or independently from the operating system. The VDI environments are there, virtual desktop infrastructure. So there are lots of technologies that are implemented in data centers to virtualize almost everything so that we can transfer this intelligence from the underlying hardwares to the software. The hardware remains just a bare metal, and if something goes wrong with the hardware, all we need to do is we need to replace it with the new one. So that's what the advantage it offers. And in Microsoft Hyper-V, we can use the storage virtualization, network virtualization, and compute virtualization. And combining these three, we can call it the HCI, hyper-converged infrastructure. So today, hyper-converged infrastructures are used to virtualize these three primary components of the data centers: the compute, the storage, and the network. Well, in this tutorial, I will be focusing more about the compute virtualization with the help of Microsoft's Hyper-V and deploying the virtual machines on the Microsoft's Hyper-V. I will talk about the deployment of the Hyper-V, how you install the Hyper-V, what are the prerequisites for the Hyper-V, deploying the virtual switches so that you can connect these virtual machines together, creating the virtual machines, and creating the virtual hard disk for these virtual machines. So you will notice that almost everything is virtual, be it your network, be it your machine, be it your storage. So this is the result of the virtualization of the compute, the CPU and the memory that hypervisor does. It also emulates or simulates some of the hardware components into the software components for the virtual machines. Like a virtual hard disk represents like a physical disk for the virtual machine, but it is not. It is just an encapsulated file that is stored in a physical storage somewhere, but it looks like or it resembles like a physical hard disk to a virtual machine. Same, we have virtual NIC, we have virtual floppy disk drives, we have virtual IO interfaces. So we have lots of virtual components that we use, and that is all result of this virtualization stack offered by Microsoft's Hyper-V. Without any further delay, let's get into the demonstration where I will show you installation of Hyper-V and creating the virtual switch machine and the virtual hard disk. Before you start the installation of the Hyper-V, you need to ensure that you have the required hardware and the operating system. In terms of hardware, it needs to be a 64-bit processor on your physical machine with Intel VT if it is from Intel, or AMD V virtualization technology and the second level address translation enabled in that is used by the hypervisor to deploy the virtual machines or the virtual components. In terms of memory and the storage, we need to have adequate storage and the memory available on the system that we can allocate to the virtual machines. And in terms of operating system, so it need to be a server operating system. You can use server 2019 or 2022 or any version. And if it is client, so it can be client operating system Windows 10 or 11, and especially the pro or enterprise edition of that client operating system where the feature is available. I'm using the server 2019 data center over here. I will click on the start button to move to the server manager to add the roles and features on this system. And here it will do the inventory for this system, that what roles and features are installed. I don't see any Hyper-V over here. So to install the Hyper-V on this machine, I will click on add roles and features. Either I can click add roles and features and do the installation through the server manager, or I can do it through command line tools like DISM or the PowerShell. I will click on next to do the role-based installation. I'm not doing the VDI setup. So it is role-based deployment and the deployment of the Hyper-V. So I will choose the server, this server, local server, or a remote server where I want to do the deployment. Then I will choose the Hyper-V. I will also select all the management tools and the PowerShell modules that will be required to do the day-to-day management of Hyper-V components like Hyper-V virtual machines or the storage and network stack of it. Click next. This is the list of the features that you want to install. Then next, you can choose a network adapter to create a virtual switch, or you can ignore it for now and you can create the virtual switches later on also anytime. Then I will ignore this for now and will deploy this virtual machine without, Hyper-V without any virtual switch on that. Then virtual machine migration, I'm not doing any migration for the virtual machines as of now. I will choose the location for the virtual hard disks and for the virtual machine configuration files. This location can be changed later on as well. This will act as the default location for your virtual machines and the hard disks if you do not specify the locations during the creation of the storage and the machines. I will go with next, and this will require a restart. So especially if you are doing the installation on the remote machine, then check this box so that it will automatically restart that target server. Instead of you logging into that server and then restarting it. So it is better to restart it automatically and then click install. This deployment will take few minutes and it will restart this machine. Many people have misconceptions about the hypervisor, that this hypervisor is actually installed on top of this host operating system. Because I already have a Windows Server operating system, and I'm talking about especially those people who understand the type 1 and type 2 hypervisors. That type 1 hypervisors can be installed on top of the hardware directly, just like in VMware if you're dealing with. So VMware ESXi you can install directly on top of the hardware. But here, because we already have the operating system, server operating system, so it looks like that this hypervisor is getting installed on top of this operating system, which is not the case. In this picture, you will see the Hyper-V architecture, that how the hypervisor is installed on top of the hardware. The devices, processors, memory are at the bottom. Then there is hypervisor kernel on top of it, and the host operating system is shifted to the root partition on top of it. So we have two kind of partitions: root partition or parent partition, and the child partitions. Child partitions have the virtual machines with their guest operating systems on them, whereas the host operating system which was running on this server is moved to this root partition. So this operating system is also treated, or this host is also treated as a virtual machine, you can say, and it can have the virtual components like the virtual NIC or the virtual hard disks can be associated on it. So this is how the hypervisor architecture in Microsoft Hyper-V is, especially for Microsoft Hyper-V, I must say. And then in the root partition, you will notice that there are virtual service providers that provide the services through the VM buses, so that the integration services like clipboard sharing, if I want, or I want audio video sharing with these virtual machines from the physical machine. So this virtual service provider service will provide those services, and the consumer services are running on the child partitions. So virtual service consumer, VSC, as you see on the child partitions, are running. Each virtual machine is running in a child partition. So depending on number of virtual machines, I will be having the child partitions on that server. The kernel mode drivers of this hypervisor, or hypervisor as its own Windows kernel that it is using to interact with the underlying hardware and providing these hardwares by virtualizing them or by emulating them into the software components to these virtual machines and to this host as well. So this is the architecture of the Hyper-V. Well, the Hyper-V is installed on this server. I will log into this machine and will move to the Hyper-V manager to manage the Hyper-V virtual machines or other components. On the left, you will see that Hyper-V will be displayed. Let us complete this deployment. It will perform the inventory. We need to wait for a few seconds to see that. It will query for all the resources and the services on this machine. You will notice there will be a management tool to manage the Hyper-V, and this is Hyper-V Manager. We also have the PowerShell modules for this. So this is the Hyper-V on the left that you see is now displayed. Inventory is completed. I will launch the Hyper-V Manager and will show you this host. From this Hyper-V Manager tool, you can manage multiple servers. You can right click and connect to remote servers and manage them from one single window. You will choose the Hyper-V host that you want to manage. You can do the Hyper-V settings at this point also, like for the configuration of the virtual hard disk where they will be stored, the virtual machines storage location. Then other configuration settings are there for setting up the NUMA or the storage migration settings or enhanced session mode policies, replication configuration policies we can configure. These are some advanced configuration settings. I'll leave them default, and we'll talk about them in other tutorials one by one. So let us set up a virtual network first of all on this to be used by the virtual machines. So for that, you can go to the Hyper-V virtual switch manager on the right side. If I make it full screen, so here we have virtual switch manager under the host, which I can use to create the virtual switches. We have three options to create the virtual switches. Number one is private. If I create a private virtual switch, then the virtual switch will be used to connect the virtual machines together. Even the virtual machines cannot talk to the host operating system. I mean, there is no communication between parent and the child partitions. Only child partitions can talk to each other using the private network. Only the VMs will talk to each other. This is a good solution for testing, training, or for development environments where you want the virtual machines to talk to each other and run them in a isolated network altogether. But if I want to create an internal network which will connect my virtual machines with the Hyper-V host, this host where the virtual machines are running, then I can create an internal network. What it does, it adds a virtual NIC on this host also. Like I mentioned in the architecture that the Hyper-V host is also running in the parent partition and it is treated like a virtual machine. So you will notice as soon as you select the internal network, so you will get an additional virtual NIC added to your server. I show you the number of Ethernets available. I only have one LAN card on this machine right now. This is the physical NIC of this machine. If I create a private network, then still I will have only one. You see, this is the virtual switch that is created, and I will have only one network connection, which will be this. So if I take you to the Ethernet, and there is only one network interface. Let me just open it with the network connections list, ncpa.cpl. So there is only one interface and there is no changes into the interface. But if I create the virtual switch that will be internal, that allows the connectivity of the virtual machines with the host, so the host need to have the virtual NIC on it as well. So I will create the virtual network as internal, and this is internal network. So I will provide it a friendly name, internal network. And you will notice a change on the host machine done, that a virtual NIC is added on this machine. This is the internal network virtual NIC added. You see virtual Ethernet is added on this physical machine, so that through this interface this Hyper-V host can talk to the virtual machines. Still, the connectivity of the virtual machine is not to the external network. If you want to send the traffic of these virtual machines to the external networks, suppose you are in the production environment and these servers will run some services like web services or any application database or anything, and these services will be consumed by the clients in the external network in your corporate network, then you will go with the virtual switch manager and you will create external type of virtual switch. This external switch will use your physical network interface, and your physical network interface of the virtual machine will be turned into a virtual switch, and using that it will send the traffic outside. For this demonstration purpose, I will use either the internal or the external switches only. So this is internal or private switches, excuse me. Now, next thing is to create a virtual machine or a virtual hard disk, or a virtual floppy disk is also there that we less likely use these days. To create a virtual machine in Hyper-V, I need to click next and create the virtual machine here. For an instance, this is VM1. This is what I was talking about, that during the installation, a default location for the virtual machine configuration and virtual disk configuration was specified, which is this. But I have the choice during the deployment of the virtual machine, I can choose a different location to store the configuration of my virtual machine. Then I will go with this. I mean, there is no need to check this if you want to keep the default location, else you can define it separate location. We have got two generations of virtual machines. So we got generation 2 virtual machines in our server 2012 R2 operating systems for the first time, and the legacy hardware components were removed from these VMs. These legacy hardware components were like UEFI was introduced instead of BIOS. So BIOS is a legacy component. ID controllers or the floppy disk controllers, COM ports. So such controllers or such legacy components that we don't use these days, and those synthetic adapters were, the legacy adapters, network adapters are removed. I will create two virtual machines, one with generation 1 and second with generation 2. You will see the difference between the components that they offer. So if you are using 2012 R2 or later operating systems on the VMs and you want to use the advanced features like secure boot for your virtual machines using UEFI, then consider creating it with the generation 2. I will provide the memory for this, then the network that I want to connect it to. So it will be my internal network where I want to connect, or the virtual switch, virtual network switch, the default name that I picked. This is the virtual hard disk. I can create and attach virtual hard disk later on as well. Otherwise, it will create a virtual hard disk, and that hard disk will be used for the virtual machine to store the data persistent, the operating system and all. Now, if I go to this virtual machine and I show you the virtual machine settings, so you will see that there are lots of components in it. You can open the settings or these all options by right clicking on any particular virtual machine in the Hyper-V Manager console, or you select the VM and these options are there under the VM here directly as well. So if you don't want to right click and you want to see them, so you see the legacy component, the basic input output system is there. It has the IDE controllers and it can only support the boot from the IDE, the integrated device electronics, the 40 pin or 80 pin connectors we were using in our physical machines to connect to the hard drive or CD-ROM drive. So we have those components still there. SCSI boot will not be supported in this generation 1 virtual machine because it's an old type or legacy virtual machine. When it comes to the network adapters, so I have one network adapter here, but you will notice that when I add a network adapter, so I'll get two options to add network adapter or the legacy network adapter. So I can use the synthetic adapter or the legacy one. Legacy one we use to boot from the network. So if I want the network boot, I will be using this legacy adapter in this generation virtual machine. But generation 2 supports the boot from the synthetic network adapter. COM ports are there, diskette drive, floppy drives. No one uses those floppy drives. We use them for providing the answer files for the deployment of the operating systems or providing some configuration. So we were using that virtual counterpart of the floppy disks inside the VMs. So we call it .vfd. So that is also there. So you will see lots of legacy components are there in this virtual machine because it's a generation 1 virtual machine. Now I create one another virtual machine here, and this time it will be generation 2. So I'll go to virtual machine and generation 2 virtual machine. This is my virtual machine 2 in the same location I'm storing it, but it is generation 2 this time. Then the memory assigned to that 2048, I'm assigning more memory because I will be doing some operating system installation. You can configure dynamic memory also for that, so it will automatically use the memory based on the requirement instead of providing a fixed memory for this. Connection, I want to connect it to the private network, and then next I will create and attach a virtual hard disk on this machine because I'll be using this. I can install the operating system later, or I can provide the ISO image that I will be using to install it, or I can install the operating system from the network. So I can do the WDS based installation, or MDT I'm using. So any deployment service, basically Windows deployment services we use for deploying the operating systems over the network. Well, this is the virtual machine too. And now if I want to connect the, or I show you the components first of all. So here you see that it is having UEFI instead of BIOS. It is not having ID controllers to attach the hard drives or CD DVD drives. So it is only having the SCSI controller. So these are the components that I have here. If I want, I can add a DVD drive on this, and I can mount an ISO. So I'll click on add, and this is the ISO image. I can specify where from I want this. So this PC, and then here I will choose the ISO image. I have an ISO image in this machine. I have it somewhere. Let me go to the app drive sources folder, and this is one ISO image I choose, and this is the ISO image of a server operating system, and I'll click OK. So this is how you can mount the ISO, and then you can create the VHDs and attach more VHDs over there. You can go to the hard disk. You can create a virtual hard disk over here. VHD or VHDX. VHD is limited to 2 TB. If you want more than 2 TB, up to 64 TB can be created with that. If you want shared virtual hard disks between two virtual machines for clustering the guest operating systems, you can use this one. Then you will say next, fixed or dynamically expanding. So the disk will dynamically grow, or if you want to reserve the space immediately, you can use that. Or if you want a differencing disk with a parent disk, then you can use it for testing training purpose. Then I will go with dynamically growing, and then this is going to be my data disk that I need on that system, and then the size of this disk that I need, and where will I place it, and where this file will be stored. So you will define the location for it. To attach a hard disk on this virtual machine, all you need to do is you need to right click and go to the settings, and under the settings, this is the SCSI controller, and I can add a hard drive on that. It'll ask for the file for the hard drive. Then this is my data disk that I have created, and I will attach this disk on this. So I have two disks now, the OS disk, which I will be using for installing the operating system, and the second one is for data. And you will notice that the data disk is attached on a SCSI controller, and it will support the SCSI boot. So your boot disk or boot volume can be in the disk which is attached at the SCSI controller. Now I will connect to this virtual machine and power on. So I'll open the virtual machine console and start this virtual machine, and will initiate the deployment of the operating system. So it is starting PXE over the IPv4, trying to boot over the network. I can disable the network boot if I don't need that in this case. In fact, I don't need that, so I can turn off and change the settings. So it will look for that network boot. I will go with this you know turn off button to turn off this machine. So turn off, And what I'll do here is I'll go to this VM2 and settings of this virtual machine. And this is my hard disk. This is the network adapter that is attached over here with the private virtual network. And if I look for the boot order, so boot order is configured with network adapter, as you see. So that is why it is giving priority to the network adapter. I'm booting it from the hard disk, or I can move it to the DVD first of all, because hard disk is not having the operating system. So boot from the DVD, then if DVD is not there, then we will switch to the hard disk, and then we'll switch to the network adapter. So that will be the order, the boot order, just like we used to configure it in our BIOS systems, and then or UEFI, whatever you use. Then you will start this virtual machine, press any key to start, and then you will start the deployment of the operating system. That is how we can create the virtual machines on the Microsoft's Hyper-V, and we can create multiple virtual machines. Each virtual machine will be abstracted and completely isolated from the other virtual machines until and unless you put them in same network and connect them together. So you will choose the language, you will do the installation, or the upgrade of that operating system. So this is your full-fledged machine with having virtual components presented as hardware components over here for processor, memory, storage, and so on. Well, in this tutorial, you learn about the virtualization, what virtualization is, the benefits of virtualization. We talked about the Microsoft's Hyper-V and the key capabilities, or the benefits of using virtualization in the data centers, how it has been evolved over the period of time. And I shown you the deployment of the Hyper-V and creating the virtual switches and the virtual machines and the hard drives. I hope this tutorial was informative to you. Thanks for watching, and do subscribe my channel for more videos. Thank you.